All right. Thanks for joining everybody as you're coming in. We're going to have today a interesting conversation around niching down in the financial advising space and finance industry with Meagan Evertson. We will kind of give people a couple minutes to trickle in here and then let Meagan get started. Meagan and I were just talking offline. She's over in sunny California. Is it sunny today? I don't know. We're in October. It's not necessarily
We
sunny.
know. We got
Yeah.
our first rain of the season yesterday at Ford,
Very
actually.
nice. Yeah, yeah. What's are you an outdoor hobbyist? Is that like, I mean, well, I know California's kind of known for that. Like, you surfing out there sometime, Megan?
My friends are, so I'm supporting them. I'm just here for the sunshine and good weather. Yeah.
That's a good enough reason. Well, great. Yeah, thanks again for joining everybody. As most of you have probably seen me around these webinars a few times, I'm Carl, the CEO here at the Podcast Consultant. Because we do so much work in the financial space with advisors and investors, one of the things we've been wanting to do in these webinars is bring in people who understand this industry and do things beyond just podcast production and editing like we do. And so we started talking with Megan and her team about a couple months ago, probably Megan, and then decided to put this joint webinar together. So the bulk of today will be Megan sharing some of the insights they've learned at OnNiche about financial advising. Basically niching down in the financial advising space, which I think is a really interesting topic. For a little context, Megan, I went to Future Proof this last year, actually, speaking of California. And this was a huge topic. I mean, that conference is several thousand advisors coming together and talking about the challenges they have in the industry. And I was, in a lot of the marketing panels and discussing this with people and building a sort of defensible and unique niche in this space is hard. Everyone's trying to do it, and it is it seems like a unique challenge because often people come into it with sort of just their personal network, which is pretty wide ranging. And so I'm excited to hear where you take this today. Um, so Meagan Everson, for a bit of context, for those of you who want to look her up and look up their work, you can go to onniche.com and learn more about what they do. Basically, it's helping financial advisors find a niche and really nail it. So I think that's all I got, Megan. I'll let you take it from
All
here,
right.
and then I'll pop back in at the end with some questions and thoughts. Oh, and there will be some interactive polls, by the way. So everybody watching, Megan might tell you this too, but keep an eye on the screen. There's going to be some chances to participate, and then if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will, kind of get to those at the end. We'll have a little time. So I'll pause myself and let you do your thing, Megan. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And thank you for that lovely introduction. We are, like Carl said, going to start with some polls. I promise this is not one of those obsessive webinars where you have to pay attention to every second, but we really want to set the scene to what Carl was talking about a second ago, where it can be really challenging to find that unique niche, and one that you like, but also feel confident in and are excited to be marketing about. So we hope, as we settle into the topic today, that this quick little game, if you will help you kind of get a sense for why this really is so important. So without further ado, let's take a look at what this game is. It's a simple series of questions we're going to ask you. You can see the first one on the screen, and we are going to prompt a poll for each one to see who you think said the quote. So let me pull this up real quick. And all right. So first one, which company used the following message in their marketing? You get personalized wealth planning and unmatched overall value. Was it Fidelity or Charles Schwab? So I'm curious to see what everyone thinks. All right. Answers are coming in pretty quick. 100% are saying Fidelity. Oh, and now it has switched. We've got some mixed responses. Okay. Well, so I think we've got everyone's response in or pretty close to it. That's okay. So about 80% of you said Fidelity. Another 20% of you said Schwab. The answer is Fidelity. So congrats, gold star there. Let's take a look at the next one. Launch this. We got to end one poll before we launch another. There we go. All right. Question 2. Which company used this quote in their marketing? We actually take the time to listen to you, understand you and your goals. So together we can find real life answers to get you real life retirement. Is that Creative Planning or Charles Schwab? Give everyone a second. I know we're all on the edge of our seats to see who said it. A little bit more of a divide this time too. Very interesting to see. So we've got about 60% at creative planning and about 40% right now at Charles Schwab. We're going to end that poll, and the answer is Charles Schwab. So congrats again. Little unexpected twist there, which brings us to our final one for today. Now that you're all warmed up and ready to go, is who said we don't sell commissionable products. We are fiduciary obligated to act in our client's best interest. Is that Fisher Investments or Creative Planning? I'm good. Everyone, one more second for that one. No, 100% Fisher Investments. Well, apparently everyone knows their advertising because you are all correct. It was Fisher Investments on that last one. So well done there, everyone. Really appreciate the participation. But we did that for a purpose. And really, quite simply, I want you to sit there for a moment and ask yourselves, did any of these messages sound similar to something you use at your company or have even heard before? I won't make you answer that question. But if you are thinking, yes, yeah, they did sound like stuff we've said and used for our marketing, you're not alone. Really, a lot of what we see is many financial advisors sound the same. And maybe that sounds a little harsh, but as Carl alluded to at the beginning of this, it can be really challenging to find a message that stands out. Now, you have to add in something else to that consideration, though. These firms that we looked at in these series of questions have millions of dollars to spend on marketing and promote their message and get themselves out there. They have the people behind it to get it done. And well, most likely you do not. Can't. So with that in mind, how do you even compete in that space and how do you stand out? And so that's really what we're talking about today with what we recommend doing, which is to become uncomparable. So Carl kind of gave a quick introduction, but I do want to kind of talk to how we've worked with financial advisors to kind of set that scene a little bit further. So my role here is I am the director of client experience at OnNiche by Kaleido. I joined the firm actually a couple years ago, where Kristen had me come in to help her really implement this idea that she had been focusing on from what was originally her agency, the full marketing service marketing agency, and evolve that into something that we could really spread and bring to more advisors that are, small, solo, or just like looking for, how do I kind of get a hold of this idea of niche marketing? So Kristen has actually been working in the industry for over 20 years, working with financial advisors and helping them to do niche marketing. She's also the author of the book you see on screen, Uncomparable, which is a lot of what we're going to be focusing around today to kind of help guide these ideas and processes to bring niche marketing to your own marketing efforts. So I mentioned before, we want to become uncomparable. And if you're going, that is not a word, you're saying the same thing I said actually when I first heard it. I was like, oh, isn't it incomparable? Well, really, yes and no. So incomparable is something that is so good it's beyond comparison. When we think about uncomparable, what we're saying is two things that can't really be compared to each other. One isn't necessarily better than the other, but when you think about everyone these days can claim they're the best or put themselves out there as being number one or doing it like no one else has ever done it. A lot of those claims can be very challenging to back up. So if everyone's the best, how do you still stand out? And so that's where our philosophy comes into play today that we think you'll really see underlining just everything, which is, well, let's be different. Let's be uncomparable because you can prove that you are different through the work that you are doing with your clients, through the message you're putting out there, and bringing that authentic part of yourself to that process. So today we are officially starting that journey of becoming uncomparable together. All right. So taking a look at what is going to guide us through this process, because it really helps to start to create practical, concrete steps we can step into. So the uncomparable framework focuses on 6 different areas of your business. The first is what we're going to be focusing on today. Literally just that one section that's in purple there is your niche. But there are 5 others that you'll be able to continue on with and learn more about if you so choose. So the second one is position. That's your message that communicates the problem you solve for your niche, but also outcomes that they can expect as of working with you. We're going to look at the community. So these are the places and groups that that your niche congregates and the media they consume. So this is you going to them, essentially, the community, you going out to them. Your expertise is the knowledge and experience that you showcase. So this is how you tell your niche, hey, I'm the right person you need to talk to. I've got your back. I can accomplish what you need to and solve your problems. And finally, the sorry, I skipped ahead there. Network. So the methods of connecting and nurturing. So if your community is going out into the community of your niche, at some point you want to bring them into your network as well so that you can continue to engage and nurture and really build that relationship. No, actually, finally, the sixth one is business model. So these are the services, processes, the experiences, pricing, all of it that you build around this niche that you want to focus on. So we kind of alluded to it before, but I'll say it again. Niching isn't just challenging because it's a unique thing to do. A lot of times, one of the biggest things we hear is, well, what happens if I niche? Does that mean I'm saying no to business? Is it the right niche? What do I do here? And so it can be a very, dare I say, scary process to take that first step in. And so that's why we really want to ensure that you can feel confident in the niche that you're choosing because it is a full commitment. But I am getting a little ahead of myself. So let's define it. What is a niche? There's a lot of confusion about what a niche is. I'm going to kind of give some examples of what we heard, and I'm curious how this resonates. So when asked about a niche, advisors will often tell us they have business owners as a niche, or executives, or they work with retirees. And so if anybody here is nodding their head, I think I saw Carl nod his head. Maybe you're thinking, yeah, why wouldn't that be a niche? That's focus. That's not just the entire market here. But the reality is that's most likely, in most of these cases, is a target market. So really a group of people that you're trying to reach with marketing efforts. You're building this campaign. It might be a one and done. It might be just the marketing campaign and nothing else, but it's a target market. So there is going to be a little bit of overlap as we define niche more explicitly. In comparison, niche is going to be a specific market segment with unique traits. So there's our overlap. But then it's going to take it a step further. They're also going to have a shared problem that needs specialized financial planning. And this is why when we looked at the framework, we had all of those other elements and not just here's a niche, go market to it. It's really about, how do the services you provide, the processes you provide, the environment you provide, all help address that shared problem your client, that is your niche, faces. And so it takes it a step further than just a simple one-off target market campaign, because it really is a commitment to show and build expertise in that space and serving this niche. So again, a lot of in common. Just think of it as target market, maybe short-term, temporary, one element of your business. A niche is really that long-term commitment to serving that audience. So designing your brand, messaging, and content. So as we continue on, we're going to take a closer look at that. So we're going to continue to just kind of drill down into this, slowly stepping our way through. So next, there are niche markets we can start with to help begin to guide us. Now, I will say many of the advisors we work with want to stop here. That's kind of what we saw when we said, well, how do you define a niche? And that's okay, but this is just our starting point. This is not where we end when we come to define a niche for ourselves. These 5 categories are really kind of the main buckets that you can find to help give you direction or explore different niches as we go through the process today. But also I'll mention, sometimes they can fall into more than one bucket, and that's okay. Again, these markets are meant to help you really just provide guidance to yourself and figuring out who is my niche. So just a quick overview of each one. So we're all working with those definitions. We have the same foundation as we talk through this. Our first one is career. As you can see, it's listed as professions, employers, industries. So when we are talking about this niche market career, those are the business owners, healthcare workers, United Airlines pilots, which, as you heard, is very, very specific, or American Express executives. Those are examples of possible niche markets in this category. Event really focuses on the life transitions and life stages. So it could be clients that are getting an inheritance, unfortunately, the death of a spouse, or entering retirement. So again, that retirees, pre-retirees, we tend to hear a lot when working with financial advisors. That is relevant. We're just going to continue to go deeper with it as you go through the 3 steps. So the next step, we have expertise. This can be focusing on needs around like special needs planning, exercising stock options, divorce financial planning. So really, this is about those specialty services that you're able to provide to clients that is unique or is a very niche market, you might say, in that case. And this is, as we kind of shift into these next 3, you can kind of see why there might be overlap in the markets of your niche. So The last couple are we've got mindset and values. So we're looking at religious beliefs, cultural mindsets. And so this can be people that are philanthropists and really worried about what they're going to be doing with their money. This can be people who want to be responsible investors or giving back to their religious groups. And that's when we see come up a lot. And so it's especially important to be working with people in their space that, align in values. And so that can be a really great place to focus as well. Last but not least is affinity. So common connections people share. So hobbies, interests, lifestyles. This can be university alumni. This can be, people who homeschool their children. This one, you tend to see a few less examples come up, I will say, but it is kind of round out our categories of niches that you might find yourself really focusing in on. So knowing these categories from there, we can then explore and refine our potential niche. So how do we actually do that? Well, I kind of said it, gave you a sneak preview a second ago. There are really 3 steps that we are going to go through. And this is what we're going to spend the rest of our time here together talking about is we're going to go from these broad niche markets down to discovering a niche that is right for you. So this is a process we actually go through with the advisors we work with that OnNiche. And it can sometimes be a lengthy process if some have no idea where to start with a niche. For others, it can be, I've got a niche, but I just need to make it even clearer and stronger. So I am going to give a quick disclaimer to anyone listening in today and on the recording is when we normally give this presentation, we do it in a workshop format. So this is a couple hours long. We are going through all the steps, all the questions, everything. But clearly we do not have a couple hours here today. But what my goal is that you will, after going through and talking through the process with me, have a short list of possible niches kind of ruminating in your head that you can actually continue to refine as you go forward and move on from today. So disclaimer over. On to the good stuff. But first, we're going to brainstorm your niche. We really want to figure out what's the potential. And we're going to do that through a series of questions that you just ask yourself. Plain and simple. Doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be polished. Then you're going to define potential niches. So brainstorming helps you get all the ideas out there. Then we need to look for patterns that show us, well, who really are the client and their problem. And then finally, we want to assess potential niches. Just because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it's actually viable, or is it a good fit for you? So all 3 of these work together. And the best part is you might go through it once. You might actually repeat it a couple times, but it's a very agile process that allows you to really explore and learn and reflect, which helps set you up for that confidence I talked about earlier and finding a niche you can be excited about and bring to your strategy. So to help organize thoughts, I actually do have a worksheet for anyone that wants to follow along with it today. You don't need it, but I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the PDF in the chat. You can view it, you can download it. And my understanding is it will be available after today's session. So I'll leave that there. Basically, the worksheet that I just shared out looks like this. It's basically a little bit more detailed than what we'll actually say and walk through. But it does give you a chance to start going through this process as we talk through it. So, all right. So link is out there. We know what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking through these 3 steps. So let's start talking about brainstorming. So one of the things I may have neglected to actually talk to in my introduction is I have a background in facilitation and coaching with teams over the years working in software companies. And so brainstorming is often one of the things we can get wrong very easily. It's you stay within 1 minute, you stay in a very focused blinders on kind of bubble. And so you don't give yourself a chance to really explore. So what's a good example of bad brainstorming? Well, one of the easiest starting points that you might have when you want to start brainstorming your niches to go, let's look at the current clients and see if patterns emerge. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're not going to do that. But what you should consider and remember here is the largest number of clients in your portfolio does not mean they are the best clients or the clients you want to build a niche around. And so it could be that you have a small but more dedicated client base that you'd be more excited to serve and build up in your company. So just looking at the largest count of clients in a niche isn't going to help us get to where you want to go. The other thing too is you may say that you work best with pre-retirees and retirees themselves. And like we talked about earlier, those are not niches. So you need to give yourself that space to explore that further versus just kind of stopping at current clients. So what we are going to do through this series of brainstorming steps is actually allow our thoughts to converge. So really go wide, just explore all the areas of potential. But we're going to try and make that easy for you by kind of focusing in on 3 areas: passion, aptitude, and profitability. So let's take a look at those. But first things first, we have passion. The reason we want to start with passion, as I'm sure you can imagine, hopefully it's coming through from me today, is that it's a strong driving force. There's energy behind it. There's excitement. There's just a desire to be a part of it. And so when you can incorporate passion into your niche, it can make your work more enjoyable, more fulfilling, and that excitement, hopefully, should bring in people that are attracted to that and want to work with you because they're excited as well to work with you. And so kind of going back to what we talked about a second ago, just because it's your biggest client base doesn't mean you're passionate about it. And so when we think about, well, how do we evaluate passion? The worksheet has a full list of questions. The book has an even fuller one, but a couple just to call out here. Who are you passionate about working with? Who do you naturally network or spend time with? Because these are the people that you're kind of internally telling yourself, oh, I gravitate to this group. I'm energized by this group. And quite frankly, which types of clients are enjoyable and easy to serve? Because I've had advisors say, well, I thought I wanted to work in this niche, but I've talked to 2 of my clients today and I'm absolutely exhausted. And that's not a great feeling. We want you to be energized by your niche if you're going to build a business around it. So let's start with passion as you begin to kind of think through this. Now, we do recommend at least 5 minutes, but really 5 minutes isn't enough. Giving yourself that space to think on this, even for, a couple hours or over, short periods of time just to sit with it can be a great place to start. But at a minimum, give yourself 5 minutes to just keep writing things down and see where that takes you. All right, next up, we have aptitude. So these are your natural talents and professional life experiences. This is really important because while you can learn things and grow your expertise, and we expect that to happen, if it's just not an area that's a strong one for you, it's going to be harder to compete. It's going to be harder to, again, be energized and passionate, quite frankly. And it's also going to be harder to build that trust with your clients because they are turning to you for an expertise in a space. So if it's just not a place where you can show and demonstrate that ability, that knowledge, that experience, it's going to just be more challenging and maybe not the best fit for you. So when we think about aptitude, some of the questions that you might want to reflect on, sit with is, what specializations do my clients value most about me? So again, we are going to say, look at your existing clients. It's not a bad thing. It's just the whole picture. What unique educational background do you have or are you working on? So if you are working on a certain license or you've been considering a license, you might want to, list that down as a potential area that makes you unique. What makes you an exceptional financial advisor? It's a very specific one, but what makes you an exceptional in the role you do can make that apply for even outside of financial advisors. And last but not least, what complex financial planning scenarios do you solve for clients? So again, it's really that unique element or that area where you can just excel with flying colors. Which brings us to our last one, which is profitability. Let's say it frankly, if you can't make money, you're not going to have a successful business. It's just an unfortunate truth to how things work. So while we want you to have the things that you are passionate about and your expertise is just soaring, we have to ground ourselves just a little bit here with making sure that the clients of your niche can and will be able to pay you. So these questions are a little more direct, a little less philosophical. And it's what types of clients have enough income, even if they don't have assets, to pay minimum annual fees? What types of clients have enough investable assets to meet minimum account size? And what types of clients are most willing to pay your fees? So very practical, important questions. There's a few more on the worksheet if you grabbed it, but generally you get the idea is, can I make money off of this model working with this audience? Now, one of the other things I want to call out here, because we've talked about it can be really scary to focus in on a niche, is when we talk about building a niche marketing strategy, we're saying this is what you're going to focus on building your business around. It does not mean you're saying no to business that may come to you, and definitely not right away. That is not the case at all. It often can take some amount of time to really get going in your niche space. So just because you're focusing in on your niche and zeroing in on these types of questions, it doesn't mean that you're saying no to other business at any point. That is always at your discretion. But this is saying, where am I proactively going to work to build my business and my client base around? And so that's why these questions are so focused and directive. This is about that long-term strategy for your business. And so once you've gone through extensive brainstorming, really let those ideas soar, you're going to want to take a look and actually see all of it together. That's why we provide this worksheet with the Venn diagram, because what you're going to find is your best potential niches will lie in the intersection of all three. And that's kind of where that leads us to saying, okay, well, now that we've explored, what are our potential niches that we need to evaluate and further refine? I do just want to pause real quick, Carl. There's no questions or anything like that that I'm missing at this point. Correct? Okay, great.
I haven't seen any pop up yet. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
no, I think you can keep going.
Perfect. All right. It was a good stopping
I
point.
would
So I just
be
wanted to
I
make
would
sure.
be curious.
Yeah.
This is relevant, and you may cover it, so you can tell me to hold if so. But um, one is, how much time do you really need to block to sit down and think about this? Is this like a sit down for a weekend and do a little mini retreat with yourself? Is it sit down with your team for half a day? Is it is it a month of thinking and reflecting? Like, what does it typically look like? Again, there's probably a range, but curious to hear, because this seems like it feels like such a high impact or high stakes decision. I think in a lot of people's minds
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely feels high stakes to all the advisors we work with. And even I feel it sometimes. So let's get technical for a second. When we do these activities and we give an estimated work time to our advisors, we say a lot 1 to 2 hours. Now, the reality is not everyone's going to need that time. That 1 to 2 hours is really ideal for someone who has no sense or has never thought about a niche before. Maybe they have a broad client base and there's no real obvious winner, or they've got, you know, they maybe have a niche in mind, but want to make sure they're considering all of their options. So when we talk about that 1 to 2 hours, um, it might be sitting down all at once. You might do it a little more casually spread out, but what that allows you to do is to have that convergent brainstorming process where you're getting new ideas. You're sort of going out of the box to see, well, what am I forgetting, or what have I not thought about, or what maybe opportunities am I limiting myself from? So I'd say 1 to 2 hours if you're really starting fresh and have never really been even close to niche marketing before, or having a niche is going to be where you want to sit. But you don't need to sit for a month. But I'll tell you, some people do, because
Yeah,
they kind of they read the book and it just slowly goes through
right.
it. Go.
And I think the next obvious question that to me comes up is then, how often do we revisit this? Because again, let's say I pick a niche, and then 6 months in, I'm like, man, this just is not resonating in the way I thought, or it's not really getting traction like I thought. Maybe realize I don't really want to work with these people. Lots of things can change. Um,
Yeah.
how often do you recommend people, like, there's a certain amount you got to stick with it to see results, and then there's a certain amount of like, well, if it's not working, change it. What's your take on how to approach that? And then I'll let you continue, because I don't want to get you too off track. But this is,
No, you're
yeah.
fine. I'm actually going to answer your question in a kind of roundabout way, because
Okay, great.
it leads us into our next two steps really nicely. Because part of how do you know when to reevaluate or not, or feel confident, is the decision you make to just commit in the first place. So how do you even feel moderately good about that? So the next thing we have to do is just start to define your niche. And when I say define your niche, I'm not saying, oh, this is it. This is decision point. We're done. That's it. Goodbye. It is, okay, let's see what those niches might look like. What are they? Who are they? What are their problems? And so that's kind of takes place through a series of looking at your brainstorm. And like I mentioned, looking for those patterns and going, oh, you know what? There's a niche here for business owners that are focused on succession, or maybe it's retirees that are really focused on giving back to their church, or specific executives because you've worked with them for so long and love it. So, it's looking for those patterns and starting to define not just who are they, but what is the common problem they all share. So to help us structure that thinking process to start to just even put down the potential niche, we actually are going to look at the messaging formula here. So just as a refresher, niche is not just a general category of people you're going to serve. And so when you do your reflection, you will probably pick more of a broad niche category, which is why this is step 2. So when we think about this, we are going to, let's start with business owners. You have a 65-year-old business owner selling a family-owned business, very different than a 28-year-old serial entrepreneur. And so the problem is what takes us to that more distinctive place. And so when we think about this here, we've got one client, we've got one problem, and we're not going to get into this deep today, but it's still important to understand. what's the main primary solution you provide to that problem, and what's the primary outcome that they're going to get from working with you. And so what this does is it kind of does two parts. It's that clarity around, it's not just a broad category niche, like market. It is a actual niche with a specific client who has a specific problem to solve, and they'll have secondary problems. We're talking primary problem. And then on the other side of that equation, although it's all pluses here, is, what is that solution that they get from you and the outcome they get from working with you and getting your solution. So this helps you drill in and start to build confidence, because if you can't really define the problem, how are you going to market to that? How are you going to create urgency? How are you going to create pain? And that kind of alludes to what we'll get into with step 3 is by understanding the shared problem, you're giving yourself confidence already, because you get clarity around who am I talking to and why will they care about what I have to say. There's more to that too. So I haven't finished answering the question yet, but we're getting there. Little baby steps. So as we start to go through this, just to kind of give us a tangible example here, let's say we did our brainstorm in our Venn diagram. We had this beautiful little center of commercial pilots as our niche. So not just airline pilots, but pilots who have other jobs like flying charter flights, medevac flights, flight instructors, that kind of thing. That's our one client in this case, our commercial pilot. So now we need to define the problem they all faced, which we realized was unpredictable income from having multiple jobs or being self-employed. And those gigs make budgeting really challenging for saving for the future. So that's not a problem a pilot with more of a standard 9-to-5 gig, if that's even a thing, is going to get. So that starts to make this much more of a niche versus just broadly commercial pilots, because not all of them are going to be jumping to come talk to me. But this group might, if I can offer them one solution. So when we talk about one solution, it could just happen to be, and this is not going to be the case always, but we have a system that helps pilots stabilize their income. For others, it can be your specialties, your education. Some of our advisors that we work with do actually have systems that they've built around serving their niches. So it's going to vary from person to person, but the goal is, does it address the problem that you've identified? Then last but not least, if we follow our formula, the outcome is that our client can expect to live like a 9-to-5 person and knowing how much they can save and spend. And so they're getting their need addressed. They're achieving sort of, the life imagery and feeling good. And so already you can tell we've gone from just pilots or whatever, and which is like, oh gosh, is this the right choice, to, okay, I know who this person is. I know probably where to find them, what they need, why they need it, and we can begin to go from there. But I said I can learn from you, Carl, so I'm curious.
Oh, this is
thoughts,
this is great. I think I'm just going to kind of reinforce this. What's so unifying and helpful about this is when you come into any discussion with customers or potential customers, or even just in your general marketing approaches, it makes it so easy, right? Like, I know exactly what problem to talk about, like, and I'm sure that's your next thing, but it just really strikes me as like, if you gave me the problem of build a podcast that's successful, that is aimed at commercial pilots struggling with the stabilization of their income, that is way easier. And I know I can tell you how to make that show stand out versus one that's like, I just want to help people retire safely. Like, well, now we're competing with everybody who has a retirement podcast. So anyway, I think that's really great.
No, it's a great analogy. And I mentioned, my background before I joined Kristen's team here at OnNiche was tech software for startups. And it's the same, I think, Dale applies, is if you know exactly who you're serving and what problem you're addressing through your software, you're going to build your following a lot quicker by focusing in that area versus trying to do it all. It really does apply across the board, even though today we're really focusing, and the language and examples are financial advising, because that's what we specialize in, our niche, if you will. But it really is helpful across the board. And so by creating this definition through the messaging formula of our niche, we now have a strong foundation that we're building that strategic marketing system around. So as we head into this final step, or evaluate your potential niche, we actually only need the one client and one problem to action on this step 3. That said, I do want to call out that thinking about what is your solution, or what could that outcome be, still in this step is very valuable, because it just helps you really think through the details of it, so that you're not going, oh, wait, I don't have a solution for that. Or wait, what does success look like? So it can be helpful to still go through that thought process. You just don't absolutely need to have it fleshed out 100% as we continue. So let's evaluate. So this is one of the final steps that you can do just sort of on your own to really begin to say, well, is this the right niche for me? And so I'm sorry, but I have one more disclaimer today, which is there is no such thing as a perfect niche or niche market. I'm sorry. I've brought it up multiple times today. We're always asked, well, which one's going to be successful? How do I know this is the right niche? And well, the answer is only you can decide what niche is right for you, which is, why we want to at least build confidence in what it is that you're going to be focusing on. So as we evaluate today, the example we're actually going to stick with, just because it's a little bit more accessible to follow, is our client is going to be business owners, and their problem, why would they seek out our help in the first place, is needing to sell their business. Now, of course, there are areas where we could refine more or less, but that's what we're going to use as we continue on to look at how we evaluate a potential niche. So overall, you can't guarantee that the niche you choose will be a success, but you can reduce your risk and worry by assessing it based on 10 factors is what we found. And these are, as we talk about it, while I won't give you metrics just because it'll make your head spin, we do weight some of these more than others because they have more impact on the results. So we're going to focus on niche viability, and we're going to focus on advisor fit. And so to make this even easier for us today, I've got one more link I'm going to share if you happen to have been following along and would like to be able to take the assessment as we talk about it. Let me put that in the chat for us. All right. So we've got an assessment that's going to help us evaluate these two different categories in terms of your niche. So here's a link, sorry. So there's a link. You can go to onniche.com/assessment. I did put it in the chat just in case. But let's take a look how these business owners looking to sell their business would come out as a viable niche. So in terms of niche viability, there are 7 different factors we're going to talk about to help us understand its overall potential. So the first is pain, and it probably feels pretty self-explanatory. The more mental or emotional pain that a prospect feels about their financial problem, the more likely they are to act. And I always feel very weird saying that because it feels almost mean to be like, I hope they're in pain. But the truth is if you want them to take action, that pain has to be strong, because I'm sure I'll speak for myself. Unless there is enough things prompting me to get something done, sometimes it falls to the end of the to-do list. So we really do want to make sure that there is pain around the need, around that problem, so that they are driven to take action. And that goes into our next one really nicely, which is urgency. Pain is great, but also if they're thinking, I've got 10 years for this, I've got 5 years for this, people are going to wait, but be it because they want to put off making a big financial decision, because they think they've got plenty of time, maybe they don't. And so the more urgent it is to solve the problem, it will be easier to attract and get their attention, because chances are they're going to be actively looking for it. Now, you don't need urgency all the time, and sometimes urgency can't be predicted. Some niches involve, widows and, sudden loss of a spouse. Most times you're not going to predict that, not really, or your timeline is going to be very limited. So not every niche will have a set urgency timeline, but it is good to know sort of what those timelines are, and evaluating on a scale of 1 to 5 how urgent you think your niche's problem is to be solved. Next up, we have complexity. So this lends itself to are you going to be able to stand out a little bit more, and is there competition in the space? So if your niche's primary financial problem is complex enough that most other financial advisors aren't addressing it or can't do it as well as you, I'm sure you can hear where that's going. It's going to make your marketing much easier. It's going to be much easier to dominate in that space. It's not the most important thing, though. As I said, it is kind of weighted, but it is good to know, can you dominate in that space? We talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. Purchasing power. Are they willing and able to pay your fees? I always like to joke. I use my dog as a very fake example when I'm trying to test stuff out and do demos. And I say, cats on their ninth life is my niche. And so I go, yeah, there's urgency, there's pain, but there is zero purchasing power with cats. And, it makes its point. If they can't actually pay the money, be it they don't have it, they won't, because they don't want or see the value in paying for it. This is going to hinder your ability to not just market, but actually build the business around it, which is the other part of this consideration. We've got easy to target. So is your niche easy to find for marketing purposes? It's not the most important thing, and some will be easier than others, but being mindful of the challenge of putting in front of yourself is important. We've got growing. So you don't have to pick a fast growing market to succeed, but you do want to invest your time. You don't want to invest your time in a dying market. So being mindful of, is this space dwindling, which means you'll have less and less potential clients year over year, is a necessary consideration. And last but not least, for viability is dominance. So kind of playing on complexity, is there just a lack of competition in general? So this kind of goes hand in hand with what we talked about earlier, but it's a little bit of a different angle. And if you're following along with the assessment, it is going to be asking you specific questions to help you consider this as you answer them. That's niche viability. Is it viable? The last three that we're going to focus on are just as important, and this is the fit for you as the advisor. So when we think about it, it's expertise. Do you have the skills and knowledge? Like we talked about at the beginning of it today, you don't have to have all the expertise up front, but you should have some basic skills to be able to serve this group confidently. Credibility. So do you already work with clients in this niche? Are you in the community? Whatever that may look like, it's just going to help your presence start stronger than if you're starting at nothing. And then access. You cannot get access to every group you want to work with. And so it's important just to be mindful of, you know, can you even get to them? Do you know where to find them? Because that is a very, very important part of marketing. I know it sounds like the basics, but it really, really is. So we want to make sure you have access. When all of that is said and done, you will get a score from that. And so 80 and above, pretty viable, pretty good. 60 to 79 is where you're going to say, you don't need to abandon a niche. It's got potential, but you might need to make some changes to make it a better fit or more viable. And that can be something as simple as refining the problem, maybe going a little more narrow in the niche. What's great about the assessment, if you take it, is it is going to give you tips on the areas that you score a 3 or lower for how to do that refinement further. And then, of course, if you scored under 60, chances are it's not a good niche, or you didn't do a good job of defining it when you were considering the client and problem. So really take a moment to step back and reconsider it. Overall, I think the biggest takeaway I'd say about these scores and what it means for how you can feel confident and go forward is scoring below an 80 doesn't mean don't do this niche. However, it can be good to kind of play with it, like a plug and play experience where you go, okay, well, what if the problem I'm focusing on is actually this one? Does that change the viability? Is it a better fit? Or if you have multiple potential niches, you can go through this process as many times as you want. Last but not least, I'll say in terms of building confidence, to round out my extended answer to your question, Carl, is one of the things we do with the advisors we work with is what we call informational interviews. So if you have a pretty good idea, this is my niche, this is my client, this is their problem, talking to COIs that would be in this niche you're considering, talking to existing clients, potential clients, it's just, you could do everything right, but until you talk to people, until you get real life feedback, you're still working in a little bit of an echo chamber or just under assumptions. So that's, well, not in this presentation, is that real final step that's going to set you up for, at least for a year saying, let's sit with this niche, and maybe at a year look to see if there's a refinement to be done. So
yeah. Yeah, what is that quote? Like, no good plan survives first contact with the enemy, referring to war plans. But it's so totally true in customer discovery and being a small business owner. I can feel this firsthand too. It is, you may think you've figured out the perfect niche or whatever until you talk to 20 customers or potential customers. It is very hard to know. You're in an echo chamber in your head. And, again, you may have had previous conversations that led you to this, which is good. But kind of looking forward, you want to let those future conversations continue to refine this, obviously. So I love that point. Yeah.
But it's also on the flip side of that, because this is, if you're not used to doing like informational interviews, that's good to remember, is not everything you hear needs to be accounted for either. So there's also why it's important to have a sample size and not just talk to one person. So it's a lot to synthesize, but it's going to help you kind of feel good or, refine further. Yeah. I did see a Q&A come in of, can you effectively have more than one niche? And to put it bluntly, for your first year, you should not. Because if you have more than one, especially in your first year when you're doing this for the first time, there's no way you're focusing or giving your marketing enough dedicated high-touch attention that it is going to be able to take off or start to build the presence and expertise you need to build. Now, that's not to say you can't have. Sometimes we have clients that, so one works with women in transition. They could have been divorced. They could have had a spouse pass away or something else. And so for him, that is his niche. But when he does marketing, he actually tends to, quarter by quarter or every 6 months, kind of focus on one of those segments a little closer so that he can write more specifically to those. So they're all still his niche, but maybe he's focusing in the actual content or the groups he's engaging with in that specific marketing plan he's created. So there are, depending on kind of what your niche is and, sort of the other nuances, that is okay. That if you're trying to have dentists and business owners over here, that's not something you want to be doing.
Very tough. Yeah. I like to, I call this the Rolodex test, which is basically saying if you introduce yourself and the person on the other end says, wow, you're the first person I've heard who does X, you've got a niche. Like if you hear that commonly from people, it's a really good sign that you've gotten niche enough and specific enough in your offer and the problem you solve that you're now the one person in their Rolodex of their head that does that one thing. And so you're going to become the go-to person for that thing. And so while you say no, or you're implying that you say no to others, you're saying heck yeah to lots of the really good clients that you want more of anyway. So it's just a trade-off you have to be willing to dive in and make. But
exactly. And to kind of reemphasize, I think, what we mentioned earlier, if you have a website, your business exists in most cases already. Niching does not mean you're saying no to the people that find your business that are outside your niche, at least not right away. You're not saying, oh, you're not in my niche, I can't work with you. You can, that's your discretion, at your discretion. Yeah. But most people are not going to, most advisors we work with are not saying no to clients in their first year. They're begrudgingly taking on the ideal client that they're now focused on. But, I keep the business running and it allows them to really focus in on building that space. So as we talk about, continuing that journey that we started today, discovering your niche, as I'm sure you can hear, is an important part of the process of those 6 areas we talked about. So now that we're reaching our time together, you've got this brainstorming worksheet, which we're going to make sure, be it live or recording, you'll have access to the niche assessment link. And if you'd like us to send you a free copy of the book, onniche.com/book-request. Just fill out the form and, within a week you should hear from us of, hey, your book has shipped. And just as a side note here, if you do want to get the book and continue on, the stuff we covered today is in chapter 3. The chapters 4 through 8 will guide you through the other 5 parts of the framework. And then when you're ready to start implementing the niche marketing system, chapter 10 is waiting for you. So just know that everyone's journey will look a little different depending on where you are in understanding niche marketing, depending on where your firm is, just resources available to you. But, at the risk of sounding extra cheesy here, I'd say as of today, you're well on your way to becoming uncomparable. So, excited that we were able to get that going today. So thank you, Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Meagan. Yeah, this was great. If anyone else listening live here has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Otherwise, as Meagan said, we will be sending over, all the resources you've mentioned, and we'll send links to the recording once it's up too in the next day or two. And then you can always follow up with Meagan and ask questions. I'm sure she's happy to do that via email. I think this is great. And honestly, it is something where again, a lot of small business owners need this, not just financial advisors, but I certainly think it's relevant for them. Let's just kind of quickly, since where our work tends to come in is so much on the marketing and messaging side, and so I'd be curious to hear your take. Like, once you establish that niche, that's obviously the step 0 that you mentioned. You're like, you got to do that, and now we got to figure out the positioning and how we actually use this. Give me maybe a couple examples for how picking a very specific niche has unlocked marketing angles or strategies for clients that of yours or people you've worked with that they maybe wouldn't have thought of before. So for example, again, when you pick that dentist niche, once you've said, I'm going to be the financial advisor for dentists in the Midwest, you can now pick the 5 Midwest dental conferences and go sponsor them. And it's like clear ROI every time because you're the guy who does that, So as any other creative examples like that you've seen where people could really like hammer their marketing and their messaging home and maybe tactics that work now that they have a niche that wouldn't have before?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two key paths that I see niche marketing helping with in that sense. One, you kind of alluded to with, okay, I know I'm focused on dentists. I'm going to 5 dentist conferences. I'm building relationships. I'm a face. I'm a name. I have a presence. And so ironically, I think, Kristen likes to talk about how we're kind of hitting that cycle with social media, that it's just so noisy and crowded that even when you are actually trying to focus on a specific niche on social media, and you have to have a presence. I'm not saying you don't. You definitely do. But if your niche isn't there, or they're just not highly engaged, or it's too busy, we're actually finding you're going in person again and building these more one-on-ones, or webinars like this where it's much more personal. The point being, it's less to the masses and more about close relationships and building a network. And so it's kind of going through like, okay, we're back to events and personalized marketing in a way that's very one-to-one, or one to a few. And so it's unexpected. And I think sometimes with certain industries, you're behind the trends. And so the financial industry, at least, is really leaning into social media. And we're going, great, we're going to pick one or two platforms, very safe focus. We're going to make sure it applies to your niche and you like being on it. But also that's not the space anymore, not solely.
Right.
So let's go. So it really does give you a chance to say, okay, well, if they're not here, where? And so it's a different way to think about it. The other one is less of a unique experience so much as, I think, a really great reminder for people that maybe don't think of themselves as marketers and get overwhelmed. And I call it helps with the ooh shiny effect. One of the things I hear so much is just, well, someone told me about this LinkedIn, I'm going to go reach out to people for you, or I heard about ads, or what about AI and blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say those things don't have a place and time, but by creating a marketing strategy that focuses around you, your resources, and your niche, it's much easier to be like, is that in the plan? No. Okay, put it in the back burner, put it in the parking lot. Okay. Oh, no, it has nothing to do with your niche. Why? Okay, well, then let's sit with that. Why do we want to bring it into the situation? Because someone told you it sounds cool. Great. Let's take our time with that versus quickly switching to the next thing, because now you've created more work for yourself. Because quite frankly, and we joke about this, but marketing's kind of boring because it's a lot of saying the same thing over and over again and just being consistent. So on your end, when you're doing it, you're like, they've got to be tired of this by now. Maybe I've been saying the same thing, but most of those people are hearing it for the first time. So you switching because ooh shiny is not going to be good for the people you're trying to actually reach. And so I think it helps kind of visualize that need and effect a little bit more nicely, from just my own experience.
Yeah, same. My experience mirrors that. And the same is true of like it makes things like referrals so much more organic and likely to come, right? So just personal example, I know a ton of financial advisors. It's very hard for me if somebody came to me and said, hey, look, I've got a personal fortune I'm amassing. I need an advisor. I would have a hard time picking just one because I've got so many that I know. But if there's a specific thing, like I just exited a business, that was the trigger event, and now I'm looking for an advisor, I would think through who are the people that work with a lot of entrepreneurs who've sold, and so it's that personal Rolodex thing is really important for facilitating referrals. And then the other side I'll say is like, as far as an ROI on marketing sort of strategies, like you mentioned all these different tactics, the shiny ones, like, oh, I heard Google ads work. I heard LinkedIn ads work. I heard this outreach strategy works for some people. Like absolutely all those can work. But if you're sort of competing with a broad market that all the big firms are competing against, you have to pay like the big firms, which you can't do, right? So instead, you can narrow that focus down, make your target list much more specific and much more likely to actually reach it with a smaller budget of a few $1,000s a month instead of hundreds of $1,000s a month. And so I think that's really important too. Last thing I'll say is the podcast side. Podcasting is a really saturated market and a really saturated channel. It is very hard to start a general purpose financial advising podcast and make traction. Again, unless you come in with a celebrity behind you or a big following or a really unique take. And this is where the opportunity is pick a unique angle. Don't just be the podcast for people about to retire that's like been done 1,000 times. It's too hard. But there's people who've done all sorts of little niches within financial podcasting now that are really carving themselves a little lane. And that lane doesn't need to be huge. They just need to be the ones who do it. And so it helps you pick guests. It helps you focus where you talk about the podcast and actually attract an audience. And it's going to end up being easier to grow counterintuitively when you have a smaller audience. So anyway, I that just all reinforces what you're saying, but it comes up so often for us that I figure
Yeah.
I'll say it. Anything else to add, Megan? I think this has been great, and we're coming up on time, so we'll follow up with resources that you mentioned and kind of recording. Um, any last words though?
I would just say, we use the word journey, as cheesy as it may sound sometimes. We use it for a reason, is because this isn't an overnight decision. It isn't an overnight result. We tell our advisors that are coming on board with us all the time, we can't just say, here's leads tomorrow, here's leads in 6 months,
Right.
because this is about building an authentic business centered around you and the people you're excited to serve, and doing that with intention and, just this dedication, really. So, thinking of this as, I need to grow my business or get leads by X date next month is maybe not the right way to be looking at this, but really a journey to say, I'm committed to building the business that's right for me. And hope you're excited about that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Meagan Evertson. It's been great to have you on, and thanks so much for giving us this really detailed kind of workshop here. If you all want to learn more, obviously go to onniche.com. On the podcast production side, if you're thinking about launching a niche podcast, love to help with that at thepodcastconsultant.com. And thanks again, Megan. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Phil. Bye.